bless our time of discussion and our time with Major Garth Massey here. We thank you for the blessings that we have, especially in this Thanksgiving week. We are so grateful for our families, the blessings that we have in our lives. Help us to be reminded of all the things that you have given us. We also would like to say a prayer of thanksgiving for the food that some of us are about to eat, as we say, bless us, O Lord, in these thy gifts, which are about to receive from thy bounty, Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Well, guys, welcome. The True Gentlemen's Club is very happy to welcome you to this event. And we also have representatives from the Navy Club and the Civil War Club said that they might show up, so it seems like it's a nice event that gathers different people from different interests. And I am very privileged to introduce to you today Major Garth Massey from the U.S. Marines. Garth Massey is a good friend of mine. He has numerous experience in life in a wide variety, including his service for the United States, and that includes sometimes spent in Iraq, one of the first troops inside Baghdad during the Second Gulf War, correct? Correct. And he is major, and he has been selected for the next rank, which will be reached in January, February, yeah. February, which is the rank. What's the rank that comes after major? What? Colonel. Lieutenant. Colonel. Lieutenant. So congratulations to him for this too.
Welcome, gentlemen. So Cedric asked me to come by, or Ebiner asked me to come by today and talk to you guys about traits and principles in the warrior spirit. Gotta say, never spoke to a high school group before, so I will try and tone it down a little bit. I do like the moto haircuts in the back. You must be the Navy Club.
No, I'm
just that motivated? All right, you're fired up. Okay. All right, so a little background. I joined the Marine Corps in 1995. I'm an infantry officer. I've always been in the infantry. I've had a very fortunate career where pretty much all I've ever done is blow stuff up. And now I'm getting promoted and they're giving me a job with the pencil. So that'll be a fun change for me. But today we want to talk to you a little bit about the traits and the principles of leadership and how it applies to our lives. The Marine Corps has 14 of them that they selected. Does anybody know what a trait and principle is? This is mostly going to be storytelling, but anybody know what a trait is? Right? No? Nobody? Characteristics, right? Right? We all have personality, right? We all have behaviors, we have patterns, we have things that represent where we came from, what we believe, how we act, right? The things and the decisions we make all day long. Well, the traits are the little pieces that make all that up. Now, there's 14 of them in the Marine Corps. We use the acronym JJ, did, tie, buckle. And we're not going to go through all of them. I'm going to talk about 3 of them. I'll tell you a couple stories. But there's things like justice, judgment, knowledge, right? And then all that makes that cool little acronym, JJ, did, tie, buckle. But the reason it's important is something that the church actually calls the family of origin. And the Marine Corps doesn't make that tie for us, but I do because I think it's important. And the idea is that we observe traits in other people, things that we admire, right? Things that we don't admire, things that we don't want to be like, things that we strive to be like in the people around us. Our teachers, right? We get it from our parents. We get it from each other. We learn about the ways people behave and then how we like that in our behavior and in the people around us. And it creates what we call our family of origin. Now, the family of origin is all those traits and principles around us that we pick up on and bring and make into ourselves. Right? Well, that's what these 14 leadership traits are. So I'm going to talk about 3 of them because I like them and I have some what I think are fun stories that go with it. And then I would ask you at the end of this, and I think next week you're going to do this as well, but the idea of the family of origin is to think about the traits of the people around you, your father, your friends, uncles, aunts, moms, teachers, right? And what are the traits you want to be more like? Because you can make a choice about how you act. You get to decide what traits you want to embody. And if you just fall into it and stumble into your personality, you're going to end up with a hodgepodge mess. But you can actually choose to be a better person and choose to behave in a way that models itself after the people you admire. So, a couple of them that I like. The first one's dependability, and I like it because it's a cool story. And where's my Civil War Club? Anybody? Nobody? All right, good, because this is a pre-Civil War story. Okay?
We've all had history.
Yeah, you've all had history, so you'll be able to answer all these questions. All right, so this is a story about dependability. JJ did. It's the D in did, right? And it's about dependability. And the story is a place called Harper's Ferry. And there's a gentleman there named John Brown. Now, John Brown was not in the military, but he was going to set the slaves free. And so what he decided he was going to do is roll down to this place called Harper's Ferry, where there's a Navy magazine. Now, not a magazine like one you read about and go, oh, that's cool as shit, right? An actual place where they store weapons and ammunition, right? And they lock it all up. He goes down to Harper's Ferry, and the plan was he and his little militants would bust in, steal the guns, head back into the hills, and they would start freeing slaves, give them weapons, and it would kick off this whole movement to, like, have people be free in America, and John Brown thought he was doing this great thing. So he rolled into town with his crew, locked the town down, stopped a train, shut down all the stores, except the saloon, right? And started taking control of the town, running around, shooting guns in the air. And then they decided, at one point, hey, we don't really need this train. Let's just let it go. And so they sent it on its way back east. The train went into D.C. So the train pulls in. What do you think they did? Of course, they told everybody, hey, we got this thing going on. John Brown, Harper's Ferry magazine, taking over, big problems. So they went to the Army. By the way, does anybody understand the difference between the Marines and the Army? Okay, pay attention. All right, so they go to the Army. They say, hey, we got a problem. John Brown's here. He's taking over the magazine. We got to crush it. The Army looked around and said, well, we got a thing. We got, dinner. I didn't press my uniform out. I'm not ready to go. They said, okay, no problem. So they roll over to 8th and I. 8th and I is the drill barracks, right, where they do the silent drill team, right? They do the marching, the spinning the guns. You can see it on YouTube. They go over to 8th and I, and they say, we got this problem. Harper's Ferry. Talking about dependability, right? The Marines said, great, you need us? We're there. Took the dress uniforms, they hopped on the train, they started heading back east and went out to Harper's Ferry, rolled into the place. Now, they did get one or two Army guys that went with them. One of them was Colonel Robert E. Lee. That's why I wondered if the Civil War Club was here. Anybody heard of Robert E. Lee? Right, so he was the general of the Confederate side in the Civil War. But at the time, right before the Civil War kicked off, he was on the United States Army, Union Army, right, and he was a full-bird colonel. So he rolls up, he goes down, he gets into Harper's Ferry. What do you think the first thing they did when they got there? That's right, they closed the saloon, because they got to get control of the town. People were carousing about and causing all sorts of problems. They want all the bad guys in one spot. They shut the saloon down. So they go over to Harper's Ferry, knocks on the door, says, hey, John Brown, we hear you got hostages, you wanted to steal all these guns, we've come to stop, I brought all these Marines with us, come on out. He says no, locks the door. All right, so they're dependable. They go to the Marines, a gentleman named Lieutenant Israel Green, right, second lieutenant in the Marine Corps. Walked over to him and said, Lieutenant, open the door, go get John Brown. So he looks around, he's got his dress uniform on, he's looking good, right? Kind of checks out the scene, not a whole lot to work with, picks up a ladder, goes over to the door and rams down the door with the ladder with his platoon. They knock a big hole in the wall, and they charge through the door. First guy through the door gets hit by, a couple of the insurgents. Israel Green, dependable, right? He's right there with his men, jumps through the door right behind him. A fight starts. All the Marines start pouring in. He identifies John Brown, goes over to him, and knocks him down. He's got his sword out, right? John Brown falls to the ground. He's got a carbine. Carbine's a repeating rifle, right? It can shoot semi-automatic, so they didn't have to breech load every time. John Brown rolls over and points the rifle at him. Right. Now, just take a guess. Who wants to be in a sword fight with a gun? Right, you're in the wrong spot. So John Brown's got kind of the edge up on him. Israel Green comes down, takes his sword, and stabs down into John Brown to kill him before he could take a shot. But where did they come from? Where were the Marines before they picked him up? 8th and I, right? They came from a ceremony place. Right? They'd come from dressing up and dancing around and doing the little marching thing. He didn't have a real sword. He had his dress sword. Ceremony sword. They're lighter and they're made of flimsier metal. So when he stabbed John Brown, he was wearing a buckler with his ammunition on it, big leather thing, and he hit it, and the sword actually bent in half. So now he's lying there. He was dependable. He came when called. He's got John Brown down on the ground. John Brown's got a carbine rifle pointed at him, and now he's got a bent sword. So what do you think he did? Hit him. Yeah, he's a Marine. He hit him. He beat him with the bottom end of the sword. Just pummeled the guy until he was unconscious. But it's kind of a fun little bit of history. The point of all of it is dependability. The Marines at that time had signed up to serve when the country needed them. They didn't say when or where. They didn't get to set the conditions. Just like in our lives, we're called to serve. Now, I'm no longer in the active duty. I'm a reserve Marine now. So one weekend a month, I go down, blow stuff up, shoot a couple things, riding around in armored vehicles, and then I put my suit back on and I go back to work. Right? You will be called to make several of those same kind of decisions as you move through life, where you're dependable. The things you have said you believe in, you'll have to be ready to go, and it's never going to be perfect. Sometimes you're going to have a ceremonial dress sword when it comes time for a real gunfight. Something to think about. So, it's kind of a neat little story about dependability. Now, there are other fun ones, but the other two I wanted to hit were bearing and courage. So there was a gentleman named Staff Sergeant Guisdala. He's a SWAT officer with the Orange County Sheriff now. And we were in Iraq together. And there was a time when we were just outside of Baghdad. We hadn't taken the city yet. And in this farm fields out on the side, some insurgents were out there, and they would have mortars. Right? So a mortar is a big tube. You set it in the ground, you drop a round, it explodes. The pressure pushes the round out into the air, and when it lands, it detonates and explodes. So what they would do is run out of the tree line, drop a mortar, and run back into the tree line. You'd never see them, because it takes about 30 seconds, 45 seconds for the mortar to even land. So you'd hear something, there'd be an explosion somewhere, and then they would run off. They didn't have time to aim it. They were just trying to get lucky. Staff Sergeant Guisdala led a group of about 12 Marines. He had 4 vehicles. And the staff sergeant at that time was out in the middle of the field, standing up in the back of a 7-ton. Right? And they were taking food at the back of the 7-ton and throwing it out to his guys who were all lined up, and they were stacking it over where the rest of the company could get their food from. So they're just delivering chow. Right? Now, what is bearing? Before we finish the story, does anybody know what bearing is? How you carry yourself? What do you got?
What, you mean bearing like a direction?
Nope, not like a direction.
Okay.
Bearing is the way you carry yourself. So you gentlemen are all going to be in a position to be leaders someday. Of your family, of a club, of your business, right? Of something that you participate in, volunteer work that you do, you will be in a leadership position. Bearing is how you carry yourself. If I came in here in the classroom, or Mr. Ebiner came in at the classroom at the beginning of every day and his head was down and he was kind of not sure what he was doing and he was moving around and couldn't focus on his class, you as students would stop paying attention to him, right? I would, right? If I came in and told you I was in supply in the Army, you wouldn't even listen, right? Right? All right, so bearing is how you carry yourself. It is the way you project, the way you choose to behave, the leadership traits that you choose to embody. So Staff Sergeant Guisdala is standing there unloading food and passing it to the rest of his guys. We hadn't gone into the city of Baghdad yet, and we hear a pop. Mortar's coming. He kind of looks around. A couple hundred meters away, mortar lands, explodes in the middle of this field. They missed. All right? All the rest of the Marines from H&S Company, headquarters company, take off running, diving into the holes, putting up their helmets, getting on their rifles. The staff sergeant walks to the back of the truck, kind of looks around, right? And his whole section's watching, because they're trying to figure out, what should they do? Should we run and hide? Should we get cover? Do we need to go fight? But it was just one round, out in the middle of nowhere, in a field full of, farmhouses, little kids running around, all kinds of stuff. The staff sergeant walks out to the back of the truck, spreads his arms, and goes, "Marines of Headquarters Company, stay down. I will bring you your food." And he turns around, grabs a box of food, and threw it at his section, standing down there below, whose mouths were hanging out on the floor, right? Because they were all expecting, are we going to hide? Are we going to fight? What are we going to do? They caught the food, and those 12 guys delivered all the rest of the food to that headquarters company that stayed in their fighting holes, right? Now, there was no battle going on. There was one round that went off. But the staff sergeant set an example with his bearing that calmed everyone down and told everyone in his group how they should behave and what they should do next. So you can take some of these traits, and when you embody them, and when you put yourself in a position of stress, or where courage is demanded, or where you're unsure of what your next action can be, and you look to the leader, you're going to look to how they behave. And if how they behave, is with courage, is with strength, is the way the staff sergeant did, where he stood up and said, "I've got this. What's most important now is to make sure you guys eat," right? And handed them out their food. It calms everyone down. And you as leaders, from the young gentlemen's, or if you ever go into the Navy, or whatever group you're here with, or why you're compelled to come, if you ever find yourself in a position where people around you are starting to panic, having bearing, being that calming force, can change the outcome of what's going on. Make sense? Check or hold? Right? Check? All right. Good to go. Okay. Couple other traits. There's some fun ones, easy ones to talk about, things like unselfishness and tact and integrity. Those are great. But I wanted to tell you a story about courage. So pop quiz. There are two types of courage. What are they? Anybody? Take a guess. What is courage? You want? I can feel it. What do you got? What's one type of courage? I'm going to hit you right now. Physical courage, right? Physical courage. That's where he was going. I can feel it. I wasn't really going to hit you. All right. Physical courage. I will tell you that as a trait, physical courage is easy. It's easy to be physically courageous, right? Just stand up and go, yeah, follow me, let's go. Doesn't mean you're right. Just means you're being bold, right? Bold is good. Bold is good. What's the other type of courage, though? Mental? Yeah, mental or moral, right? The choices you make in here, right? And all of our decisions, all of the things that we bring out and embody in life can have both physical and moral courage involved in it. You're making choices every day from, what you ate for lunch today. I don't know if that took courage. Depends what you're eating. All right? Your mom's cooking? Sure. What you did coming to school, the teams you're on, standing up for what is right. I love this. I saw it when I walked in. I will not lie, cheat, or steal. Right? Or tolerate those who do. Moral courage, right? So let me tell you a story that has courage in it in a couple different places. You guys like the war stories? We don't have to. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So when I was in Iraq the first time, I got 3 years activation actually in the last 10. Activation where they took me as a reservist, activated me and sent me someplace. But the first trip we went over, we had a platoon full of Humvees. You know the trucks you see on TV, right, with the machine guns on top? All right, I had 22 of those. And it's called CAT, Combined Anti-Armor Team. So some of them have missiles to blow up tanks. Some of them have machine guns to make the tanks close their hatches so they can't see, so that the missiles can blow up the tanks. So they work together as a team, and the team is meant to fight off armor, right? So we screen, we go out in front, we drive way out and do reconnaissance of where the rest of the unit is going. And when we stepped off, there were like 144 vehicles in our battalion. The battalion's like 1,000 guys. And one of those sections, 4 trucks, was responsible for the front. And then we had flank security and we had rear security. And that front section at night was driving way out in front, like a couple kilometers in front of the rest of the battalion, clearing the roads, checking the edges of the town, because we had this whole convoy of trucks just lined up, coming up behind them. And they had to make sure things were safe. Well, one night, about 6 days into the war, coming off the middle of nowhere, the lead truck left the pavement and went onto a dirt trail. Well, they didn't know they were going to do that before it happened. All right, so they got a little air and a Humvee, hoorah. All right, launched themselves up, and as they came down, the gunner slammed his forearm, because he was standing up in the turret, and he slammed it into the turret and broke his forearm. All right, his last name was Coker, Corporal Coker. So for 2 days, I didn't really see him. At the end of the second day, the doc, who was this awesome 52-year-old man, line corpsman, 2 tours in Vietnam, got back in the Navy so that he could come over to Iraq. Right? He was a professor at University of South Dakota, semi-professional bodybuilder, and a photographic memory. Right? So the guy was really impressive. He comes over. He's got a little Coker with him. Right? Coker comes over. He's looking all green. He goes, "Yeah, sir, we got a problem." See, Coker broke his arm. Snapped it clean. And it's been a couple days, and he was hiding it, but I found him now. And he's broken. But he doesn't want to go home. We're 6 days into this war. Right? So we're talking about moral courage, talking about having to make a decision. You got a Marine who has a broken arm and cannot function. Right? But he doesn't want to leave. Now, why didn't he want to leave? Machismo? Right? Apple pie, mom, the American way, that kind of stuff. And he didn't want to leave because his dad was a veteran from Vietnam and had lost one eye in a grenade during the firefight. His grandfather was a veteran from World War II, had been shot in the back with the Japanese machine gun. Right? And in fact, there was a male Coker in every single war the U.S. had ever fought. He's one of those guys from like the movies. This guy was real. And he could not go home 6 days into this war with just a broken arm. Couldn't reconcile that in his mind. And he was asking me to make a decision about letting him stay. Moral courage. What's the right thing to do? Right? Now, right, wrong, or indifferent, and I'll tell you how it ended. I let him stay. I talked to the doc wrapped him up. We tucked him in the back of a truck. Frankly, at that point in the war, nobody was going south anyway. So the only way out was on a helicopter. So we wrapped him up, stuck him in the truck, and carried him with us. 2 days later, after throwing up a bit, he was back up in the gun turret. All right, so moral decision. He displayed physical courage, right, and we made a moral decision to keep him with us. and it had payout. You guys want to hear one last story? How are we doing on time?
Yeah, 8 minutes. We're good.
Okay, one last story. All right, so there's a north-south running road. I'll use this line as the other road. All right, this is north up here, and there's a village. And a river. And a bridge. All right. So, a couple days into the war, in a little town called Alcu, there was a convoy from a headquarters element of artillery driving up this road. And as they got to the north side of the town, an RPG came ripping out of this last thing. Went through the driver's arm, because he was sitting with his window down, just chilling. Okay? Ripped his arm off, went into the engine block, and exploded inward. Right? Nobody else was hurt. That sucked. Right? But the engine block exploded. Vehicle pulled off to the side of the road. And what you had was about 4 or 5 Marine trucks from this headquarters element sitting here, and you had some trench lines over here. Now, what was going on, they started shooting at him from these trench lines. They got a critically wounded guy. They got explosions going all around them. Mortars started landing, but they couldn't aim very well, so they're just kind of going everywhere. Right? And this guy's seriously, seriously wounded. And they call down to our headquarters element and said, hey, we got a critically wounded Marine. You got to get up here. You got to get up here now and pull this guy out. Okay, no problem. Roger that. We're a couple clicks down here. We're heading north. Grab the company. Here's the plan. We're going to roll up here, set our trucks up over here in this field, shoot this way into this spot here where the enemy are, and they're going to hunker down. They're going to hide. And then we're going to get that line company online. They're going to cross over the river, and they're just going to walk through the town, pretty as you like, roll up on this trench line, roll up the enemy. War's over, right? We missed some critical planning steps, but this isn't a class about planning. But the important part was, when we got here, what do you think happened to us when we hit that bridge? Yeah, it exploded. No, the bridge didn't explode, thank goodness. But the enemy, who didn't want to be killed, moved down into this corner and started shooting at us as we crossed the bridge. So one truck made it across. It had Staff Sergeant Gwizdala and Nathan Coker. And those two guys took their truck across and put it right here on the side of the bridge, on the north side of the bridge. Right? And they started taking fire, because there were now bad guys here in this building. Right? So they're under fire. Now, the rest of the trucks saw the shooting on the bridge and said, well, we can't pass there, so they went and parked all the trucks down here. My truck happened to be 5th in the line, because I had one section, me, and then another section. When I saw them going across, we did the white knuckle screaming thing. We drove across, and we also put our truck over here. However, not nearly as manly, because we weren't showing a lot of bearing at the time. So my driver, across over the bridge, right? He gets to the other side, and there they were. The roads were what we call crowned. You know what a crowned road is, where it comes down on either side? So they were parked on the side of the crowned road, and from the building, they couldn't shoot them, because they were slightly down below the road height. Right? So we went off the road to go park next to them, forgot the parking part, kept driving out into the field, and we actually crashed in a hole over here. Right? It was really funny. Yeah, laugh it up. All right. All right, so the gunner shoots up out of the top of the turret, flips over on his head, and falls back in the exact same hole, and lands upside down with his feet sticking up where his head used to be. All the ammo came out of his truck and landed on his chest, right? And the rest of us are all slammed up against the dash. Everybody gets out. We're all okay. All right? But now our truck has 2 wheels sticking up in the air, and then the nose sticking down in this hole where some farmer had decided to, I don't know, plant carrots or something. Didn't smell too good in that hole. So we get up there. It's okay. Coker's up on the gun, right? We got machine gun fire going. There's 2 trucks over the hill. We swing our machine gun around. Eventually, can't shoot them. Because with our truck like this, the gun only shoots up. No way to get it down so they can point it towards the enemy. So what do? We yell over Coker, come on, man, get him, right? He swings his gun over. Kapow, 1 round. Gun dies. It jammed. All right. So he had a 50 cal. Those were made back in the 1960s, and we still use them today. And apparently his was a little older than we thought. So it wouldn't shoot anymore. So, hey, I got this great idea. Great, I'll take my gun off my truck. It's the coolest gun ever. It's called a Mark 19. It's a 40mm automatic grenade launcher. Shoots over 300 rounds a minute of grenades over a mile. Right? It is the coolest thing. And they only give us ammo boxes of 32. Why? Because you wouldn't stop. You can see them flying and they land and everything explodes. It's beautiful. So, I got this gun, but it weighs like 70 pounds. So I climb up on top, no problem, rounds are flying, pick this thing up, lots of bearing, big deal. We walk over, I get to Coker's truck. Coker takes a 50 cal off his, leans down to grab my gun. I push this 70-pound gun up, he grabs it and drops it on my head because his arm's broken. Yeah. Yeah, so I had to pick that thing up, walk around, get on the hood of his car, and put it on myself. All right? And why? Because I made a decision. Decisiveness is one of our traits. Earlier, to trust in Coker and his abilities. Now, he made up for it. Right? And we actually survived here. Right? He put the gun on. We made the enemy get quieter than they were when they started. And then we went and we actually rescued this guy and pulled him out at the end of the story. But the point is, the decisions you make, the moral courage you exhibit, trying to choose what is right and what is wrong, doing the right thing, there's consequences. And sometimes the consequences can be a fun, dramatic story, and sometimes they're just little things that happen in your everyday life. But the trick is to decide who you want to be. Decide what traits and principles you want to embody and how you want to end up. And it is a choice. And I think you guys are going to talk about it again next week. But all of these different traits. Now I'll send Mr. Ebiner the list of all 14 traits, but you guys can Google it because you're all tech savvy, right? So Marine leadership traits and principles, it'll give you the whole JJ did tie buckle. You look them up. All right? They're all pretty cool. But if you're choosing how you want to behave and you're choosing the kind of person you're going to be, you can end up with a gun dropped on your head in the middle of a firefight. Or it can just affect your whole life. And it'll change the way you behave. But I would suggest to you that, like a lot of things, you can behave on purpose, right? You can decide who you want to be, how you want to behave. And if you use family origin, if you allow yourself to think about things like traits and principles that create you as a leader, you as a man, you as a person, right? If you let those things into your life and you think about them consciously, you will choose to do the things that make you better, and it'll work out for you in the end. Coker's still a very good friend of mine, by the way. His arm looks like an S, and he's a CHP officer right now. He's the chief instructor in Northern California. So, pretty studly guy.
Great, thanks a lot.
1 minute. Do you have time for questions?
The balance has been a couple of minutes off this past 2 days. So, do you have any question, really quick, and brief answer?
Yeah.
Are you getting a new call?
What's that?
Are you getting a new call?
No. That was a moral choice I made. I don't play the game.